Hi, I'm Nicky Stubbs. I head up the Sales and Marketing Division at NB Publishers. And today we've heard about big business, we've heard about small business, we've heard about restaurant business, we've heard about billionaires. But what we're going to be talking about today is a very special form of business book, and that's business memoir. And yeah, when Jean first asked me to facilitate this discussion, I was absolutely terrified because I've written a cookbook. And then I reread both Lincoln and Mteto's books, and I realized there was nothing to be frightened of, because both Mteto Nyati and Lincoln Marley are stupendously nice guys first, and then excellent leaders next. In the reading of your books, and because they're so personal, I realized that my experience in business relies very much on the values that you talk about in both your books that come through your personal narrative. So the anecdote I'm about to share is not damning you with faint praise, but just giving you a starting point of what we're about to talk about today. When I interviewed for the job that I'm in at the moment, which is at the heart of one of the biggest corporates in the country, the head of HR asked me a question. She said, what's the best business and leadership experience you've ever had? And I said, working in a restaurant kitchen. And everybody looked really, really surprised. But then as I was reading your books, I realized that everything that you touch on, the teamwork, the integrity, that everybody matters, empowerment, the heat of the kitchen and the stresses of a kitchen are what you talk about in general business. The decision making, the commonalities being more important than the differences, engaging with staff and engaging your staff, practice making perfect, finding solutions, and these are all lessons shared in your books, beautifully illustrated through your personal stories. And we published Mteto Nyati's Betting on a Darkie first, and then Mteto brought Lincoln to us. And the foreword in Lincoln's book is actually by Mteto Nyati, and I think it's really important just to read this. Timing is everything. This book comes at a time when our world is increasingly facing global challenges such as climate change, corruption, misogyny, pandemics, religious fundamentalism, and racism. Highly regarded local and global companies are failing due to lapses in ethics. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed various national response plans as impractical and ineffective. At a time when strong leadership is required, we are seeing leadership failures across all sectors of society. The dearth in people-centered and ethical leadership seems to be the challenge of our time. Unfortunately, there are no quick fixes. It will take conscious and sustained effort to turn the ship. Blazing a Trail talks directly to these leadership challenges. So let's start at the beginning. There are so many overlaps in your books and in your life stories. I mean, you both come from the former Transkei or Ciskei or Eastern Cape. That's one of them. You're both rugby fans. I mean, you both have a hijacking story. Both of you talk about your hijacking stories in your book. But another one is your very clear message in both your books about the importance of values being shaped in childhood and being given responsibility as a child, and that setting the tone for the rest of your lives and as leaders. So I thought a lovely way to kick off is to ask you both to read a paragraph from your book which is grounded in your childhood. So it's over there. I don't know, Lincoln, would you like to go first? Mteto?
Good afternoon, everybody. My dad concluded his talk on the value of education by encouraging me to contrast the approach I was taking with that of my role models, and telling me to seriously re-examine my own values, my leadership approach, and my commitment to my own development. You cannot change anything or anybody unless you first change yourself, he said. Most importantly, you can't lead any cause or any group of people unless you lead yourself. This time, I had no smart reply. I sat and I listened. The most important thing for you is not to have the largest stone to throw at the police or the most potent petrol bomb. No, the most important thing for you is to get the best education. Embrace the best values, principles, and ethics, and be exemplary in everything you do. This is the most powerful weapon you can have against the apartheid government, the most essential skill you can use to lead others, and most importantly, you will grow to become a better person and achieve much more. Those words have been etched in my mind for more than 40 years. This was the most powerful message I've ever heard. My father did not directly challenge us on our activism. He did not repudiate our stance. He did not belittle or undermine what we were doing. Instead, he provided a viable alternative. From that conversation, it was crystal clear to me what I needed to do and how I needed to conduct myself. This was the most important moment of my life.
Good afternoon. This is in my book. I've asked a number of people to contribute. This is a passage from my sister Pelokazi. Because of the standards he set at school, our mom and dad always expected nothing less from us, and at times it made life difficult. He always excelled, setting the bar very high for his younger siblings. In my first year at St. John's College, the teachers told me in no uncertain terms that as Mteto and Fundile's younger sister, I was expected to achieve excellent grades. The pressure helped mold achievers in our family. In his university years, Mteto and his friends listened to Radio Freedom, and his political icon was the former president, Thabo Mbeki. I used to fear that Mteto would get detained or disappear like other student activists. Although he didn't realize it, he was a big influence on my political activism when I got to university. I did not listen to anyone who held views that differed from his. The quest for academic excellence our parents instilled in us fueled the work ethic we all have today. Within all of us is a streak of business leadership which we learned from our mother. I could never trade this for anything.
Bishop, we could just carry on talking about your mum and the influence that your mum had and how that happened. You describe it very beautifully in the book, and how she was moved to Ngeleni and then had to make something out of absolutely nothing, and the lessons she taught you doing that.
Yeah, look, my mom, he married my dad who had divorced. So my dad already had 6 children. So we always joked that we've got this army of children at home. And I remember at some point that I used to think that there was no other family that was as large as ours. You know, there was 10 of us siblings. Until, of course, that I met our former president, Jacob Zuma, who I understand has got like 20-something children that he knows of. Yeah, so, but jokes aside, my mom, she was responsible for this family of like 10 children, and she was a teacher, of course, and she then realized that, you know, there's no way that through the salaries of both of them, they are going to be able to raise us in a good way and be able to support us. And that's when she actually cashed her pension. There were no two pots. So she took a pension, and then she started this trading store. To cut the long story short, through that trading store, she was able to support all of us. And in fact, almost 8 of those 10 children had degrees, you know, and 2 of them, of course, they chose not to go to university, but they still were, you know, had great education. So what we learned, and some of the values that continues to serve me in where I am right now, is, of course, integrity, but sitting behind the counter in that trading store, how she used to treat the people that she employed, you know, and set a good example of how you actually can partner with the people that work for you. You can get great ideas from those people, and if you do that, they can go out all the way in terms of supporting your own growth. And so I learned from there how people matter, the people that you work for or you work with. And the second is really how she focused on clients, on customers. And so those two things are some of the things that continue to wherever I go. If you look at the strategies that I use in any organizations, there will always be two key pillars. Call them different names depending on different organizations, but they already talk about one thing, how we put our own employees first and supporting those employees to serve our customers. So yeah, she really shaped how I look at life, and she shaped the way I drive strategy today. Yeah.
And she wasn't a pushover,
No.
While your friends were playing, she held you in the shop, teaching you how to calculate, etc. And yeah.
Yeah, that's today. I talk about. When I look at where I am now at Eskom, I talk about tough love. Something that is missing. If you go to that environment, I realize that what we have been missing in an environment like an Eskom, where we had managers that were not managing and had leaders that were not leading. Think about that. If you go back to parenting, if you've got parents that are not parenting, you can understand what's happening in that home.
Yeah.
Largely chaos, right? This is really the same that we found in an environment like an Eskom, where we've got these leaders that are not doing their work. So what I got from my mom is that you can actually be tough, but at the same time, yes, you love someone, but at the same time you can be tough. That combination is really what can be a secret, and that's most of the time we just end up just wanting to be liked, and that's where most things go wrong.
Yeah. Absolutely, and we've all had the privilege of extraordinary parents, but Lincoln, you had a teacher who took you on when nobody else was. So if you just want to talk a little bit about how you got to that place.
So at 18 years old, I'd been expelled from school. I was in and out of jail. We were in and out of court. We were running away from the police, running away from the army, trying to leave the country. And then that's when my dad confronted me about going back to school. I was like, dude, we want guns, we want to fight. What are you talking about school? He said, no, one day I want you to go to Harvard and whatever. So he persuaded us to go back. And now we went back to school, but no school would take us. We went to every school, they're like, not those guys. These are the troublemakers. Until we got to a school called Newell High. And Mrs. Mbopa said to our parents, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to these guys. And called me and said, I don't know you, I know your parents. Here are my rules. You can do all your politics things, but you have to pass. And I never want to see you in this office. And from that day, she became my mentor. In everything I do, even today, in my foundation and everything, Mrs. Mbopa is at the center of it. And that idea for me was, we can't have a lost generation. We can't have marginalized youth. I was once one of those marginalized youth, but somebody gave me a chance. And that's why it's so important that we find ways of investing in young people and not let them be completely lost. And so she saw something in me that I never saw in myself. And so when I was grappling with leadership philosophies in my life, I realized that I had learned at the feet of the real leaders. If I ask any of you to think about the best influences in your life, it might be a coach, it might be a teacher, it might be a relative, it might be one of your priests or somebody. These are people who cared genuinely about you and invested in you without looking for a return. So if you go back to any of the places you come from, you see your teacher. They may not have moved up the corporate ladder, but when they see you, their face lights up, because their cause and their mission was to produce people like you. So when I became a leader, I wanted to be a leader like those people that saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so replicating ourselves by being role models to young people, finding other leaders and make them shine and do well, became a life mission, because there were people like Mrs. Mteto who believed in me.
And your father's dream for you to go to Harvard realized.
Yeah.
So just talk about the lesson you learned there.
Yeah, again, after my stupid arguments about guns and all of that, went back to school, and then, obviously went to university, but obviously I still had problems. I almost expelled at university, and my parents kept on praying, and then we were going to go and get graduation, and then I boycotted the graduation because we didn't graduate at those times. We boycotted graduation, so my parents had always gone through all of this emotion. Then the final graduation, I went, and they were able to be there and took pictures because that's what they wanted. But later on in life, a guy called Peter Slebush did something to me that I'll never forget. We're at the end of a thing where we were celebrating others, and we'd finished. Now I'm sitting at the back, and he's talking. I'm like, we finished the program, but he was asking me to come forward in front of my peers and my colleagues, and he did two things. Firstly, because I used to write to my colleagues, they'd taken all my writings and created them like into a book. And he said, I know you want to write a book one day. I want to inspire you that one day you'll have a book. Right? And the second thing he says, I know your father wanted to go to Harvard, and we as a school are sending you to Harvard. When I went to Harvard, I thought, wow, I'm going to come back with a badge of honor that I've been to Harvard. But there was a guy called Professor Clay Christensen, and he gave us a lecture that says, how will you measure your life? And he talked about people he studied with who are now estranged from their families. They had a lot of money, but they were lonely. And when I got back to my room, I looked at my life. I succeeded in the corporate world. I was moving very fast, but I was unhealthy. I had very little money, and you'd have thought it was a banker with money. But more importantly, I was not spending enough time with my family. So in that little room, I realized that I'd forgotten what matters most. And I was judging myself on the basis of the other underachievers who are not close to their families. And I was like, but I'm better than them. And when you do wrong, you rationalize. So my wife is the head of our family, all ways. So she would say to me, but you're not present. Right? Meanwhile, I'm busy with the computer. Or while on holiday, I'm busy working. Or I would be sick the whole week, but I'll go to a province because the people and the customers need me. Then I'll come back and I'll say, I'll sleep the whole weekend. Or she'll say things like, why don't you drop off the kids to school? And she would say she saw Peter Slebush and Sim Chabalala dropping off kids to school. And I would say, the reason why people like Peter Slebush and Sim Chabalala can drop off kids to school because there are people like me. So that was the second most important conversation in my life, where my wife was not asking me to work less harder. She was not asking me to be less involved. She was asking me to be clear about what is important. In the last 13 years, I've worked as hard, but I've been as engaged with my kids and with my wife. So that powerful lesson of how will you measure your life, that it can't be about the next promotion, the next accolades, those will come. But if they come and you have nobody, that's likely going to be a problem.
Yeah. No, and to stay on the personal for a little longer, I know everybody's dying to hear more about Eskom, but both of you share really openly in your books about your lifelong partnership and treating women as equals, and I'd almost call you both feminists. But just a little bit, if you could talk about that. I don't know if you'd like to carry on talking about SPA, or if you maybe just talk about how you approach it in your book and in your life, your partnership.
Yeah, for me, it started basically when I look back at my parents. As much as my dad could be going around as this black man who thinks that he was the head of the family, in reality, to us as children, what we saw that really the head of the family was my mom. She is the person who was, think about it, supporting all of the 10 of us,
Yeah.
and getting us. So from that, it became clear to me how a partnership, because that they were really good partners. And I was never really going to do something different from what I saw was working. And it took a few missteps here and there, but I managed to get to a point where I found somebody who I felt that this person would be a partner. And that is Zoleka, who is my wife. Currently, we 34 years being married, and she has been key to all of the decisions that we make. Whether we're talking about going abroad, when we went abroad with IBM for 5 years in Paris, and having those discussions about taking my family there, she was part of those discussions. Each and every decision, when I decided to leave MTN, when I decided to take a role, get a call from the president that, hey, can you do this job in Eskom? Yes, the president is saying this, but can I go and have a discussion with my wife? So that's the kind of a partnership, because I've realized that you can have all of this fun out there if you're coming back home, and home you have got World War III. That's not what you want.
No.
That's not what you want. So she has been a key partner, and I think when I look at my daughter as well, because of what she's seeing within, and look at the choice of her boyfriend and how assertive she is. Well done, right?
And Sva's very much part of all your decision making, if not the decision maker.
Yeah, no, she's the ultimate decision maker. And again, Mteto is right. When I look at my dad, he was ahead of his time. The way he would show public affection. Black men in the 60s and the 70s were not known to be holding hands and lovey-dovey, doing parties and whatever. And my dad had been wild, but got my mom, that was like the stop. And the way he treated her, the way they loved one another, I wanted that. And obviously, like Mteto, when you were young, you are very wild. I was very wild. And nobody ever thought that I would ever settle down. That's until I met Sva. And then it ended. But to have somebody who has an opinion, to have perspectives, to see things differently, helps. And to have them not just an object of love, but somebody who is an individual in their own right, also means that the children also see. And Zwa took a decision to leave her corporate life to raise the kids. And our agreement was nothing is going to change in the decision making because now she doesn't work. And the kids know if they want anything, they go to her. Relatives, anybody wants anything, they go to Zwa. Because that's the way I think my dad ran his life, and that's the way I certainly run my life. And when I look at my kids, they know what I would hope for. Respect for the other person, treating everybody with respect and dignity. I mean, it's a big deal. And then this thing that if you do find love, enjoy it. Because in the corporate setting, you go through a lot. You go through a lot at work, and when you come home, you want, as Mteto said, to find an environment of love. Of course, there are days where you go home and you look at your wife and it's like, picture no sound. And then you know you've forgotten something and you did something wrong and whatever. And there's no committee or board committee, you want to get it straight. And then, but that's life, right? So, and the more you grow, we would be married now 27 years together. You know that this is your partner. This is somebody who believes in you, and you've been with them through thick and thin. And it makes a big difference in allowing you to follow your dreams.
And then another similarity that is really striking when you read these two books is that your formative years were in an apartheid context and with an apartheid backdrop. And a quote that you have from Benjamin Disraeli in your book, Mteto, is, "Circumstances are beyond human control, but our conduct is within our power." And you both speak so magnificently to that. Not fighting against, but also not accepting your circumstances. So, Mteto, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I look back at the fact that I grew up during the Bantu education era, and we all know what that education was designed for. And then you fast forward, one is in grade 12, and then you're writing, at that time there used to be this thing called Science Olympiad. I don't know whether it's still there. Yeah. So then you end up being one of the 10 students that had been chosen, not because of affirmative action, chosen because you wrote an exam, you qualify, and you actually one of the top 10 students in math and science. When you have been trained in an education system that was designed for you not to be able to compete, then you realize that you've got a choice. You can change things regardless of your circumstances. The key thing is the choices, the decisions that one makes. For me that was really very powerful. Much earlier on, you realize that, wow, I mean, I can actually compete. Forget about all of these things. Yes, it's unfair, but I can make different decisions that can take me out of these circumstances and find myself in a different place. So that was the early thing. But when I look at throughout my life, I've realized that we cannot really be blaming circumstances. We have to think about the decisions that we're making every day, because it's those choices that gets us to where we need to be, being very intentional.
I think it's that intentionality that you both speak about. Acknowledge your circumstances. Don't pretend they are better or worse than they are, but then moving on from there.
It's an enormous responsibility you have. You might be a minority in the room, right? Maybe not much is expected of you, but you have a responsibility to succeed in spite of your background. Because when you succeed, it changes the narrative. But if you don't, you just reinforcing the narrative. So you come from the schools where we studied, you get to university. You're writing the same exam. You're going to compete with everybody. Whether you paid 10 Rand or paid 100,000 Rands in the high school, doesn't matter now. You're going to compete. You're going to say, I'm going to be better than anybody in that class. Because that's going to be the mindset. Because if you don't have that mindset, you'll accept mediocrity. You're going to say, I'm going to be best. Once you then qualify, you get into a corporate setting. Again, somebody might have a better background than you, better grooming or whatever. It doesn't matter. You are there now. How do you succeed in a corporate setting and become the best? And so you don't narrow your thing, I want to be the best in my street. I mean, really, you gotta say, can I be the best in the world? Can I set the bar higher all the time so that you can say the same thing to your kids? So my dad, if we came back with any exam or anything and you say, Dad, I didn't have a good mark, and then you're trying to say, and all of us didn't have a good mark. He says, is this exam been written for the first time? No, Dad. Also, there were people who wrote it, yes. And did they pass? Yes. It doesn't matter if it is one person, you are going to be that person. In my house, nobody's going to fail. So you set those benchmarks for how you should succeed. Then you encourage others who might not maybe have the same drive as you have, but you give them support. Because not recognizing, for example, sexism or racism or whatever is not the answer. You have to recognize those and give support for people going through that, but still have the tough love to say at the end of the day, you still have to do well in spite of all of this, because there is a bigger cause. And so in many ways, when you look at people like Mteto and others that came before him, they were role models we could look at and say, here are guys who've done well. If we don't take that step, then there's nobody who comes after them. And then I have to motivate the next group so that our kids then grow up in an environment where they can compete and they become a much more diverse society. Because if we don't solve those things, then the 30 years means nothing, because then we're stuck in our parents' problems. We've got to create a future for our kids where they don't have to deal with the burden of the past.
Absolutely. And in both the businesses that you've been involved in and the corporate that you've been involved in, these values and principles play out over and over and again. But I'm going to fast forward to Eskom now, because I think everybody is dying to hear a little bit more. And when we first met, Lincoln, you said, we're trying to persuade Mteto Nyati to go to Eskom, and whoever persuaded you, thank goodness. I read in an article recently, the 4 men who stopped load shedding in South Africa. That's the Daily Investor, and of course Mteto Nyati takes center stage. But you were called in there at a time that is probably one of the most significant South Africa's socio-political and economic turmoils, and at a time when the narrative was all doom and gloom. Eskom is stuffed, Eskom is corrupt, who's lying to whom? The leaders who say they're leading aren't leading, but they're saying that they are, and popular culture believes that they are. How is it even possible that we are where we are today? Perhaps, Lincoln, you can start with how you persuaded, or the story about how it evolved that Mteto Nyati accepted the chairmanship.
You know, speaking to publishers is like speaking to journalists. I was thinking in a closed session, because I'd never shared this with Mteto, but we shared a stage together at Wertz's 100th business school anniversary. And Mteto talked about people who are heroes. And then in the list of people he mentioned people at Eskom. And the audience was polite, but I think they wanted to boo. But they didn't boo. And then he says to the audience, you are upset because you prefer people who lie to you. We're not telling you how difficult it's going to be to do the right thing to turn it around. And so those of us in business kept on badgering the government to do something. And Pravin Gordhan at the time was the minister, so there was a lot of pushback to say, please make changes, and at least in the board, appoint competent people and appoint people who've got an engineering background. And so names were being bandied about. And so one time I got a call from Mr. Jonas, and he said, Pravin Gordhan wants to speak to me. I haven't spoken to Pravin in years. So I spoke to Pravin. He says, I want you to tell me about Mteto Nyati. What I could tell him was about Mteto Nyati. And that's where it ended, right? Anything else that happened, I don't know. But for me, when I saw Mteto's name there and the other names that are in that board, I now said they've made the right thing. Picking the right people is the most important thing about changing a company. If you don't make the right appointments, you're not going to make a change. And so I was so excited, and I've just been supportive, because again, we say to people, oh, we need people like you, Mteto, but at a distance. People like that. We want people, but we won't support them. We won't support them publicly because we want them to take the fire. But these things need society to get involved, and not simply say we want Eskom to be fixed, but nobody is prepared to support the people who are going to make the thing to turn around. So for me, I've admired the work that he and the team have done, and yeah, I spent time again through him inviting me to go and speak to the people at Eskom, the people that everybody swears, that everybody's swearing at them.
One of these?
But yes.
Article?
Yeah, Begi Dumalo. He referred me to Begi Dumalo, and I went to speak to the 30 or so people who run the power plants. There's no media. This is me as a South African, as a concerned person, to talk to them and what they're going through. And it was one of the most important conversations, because leadership is not about when it's good. Leadership is about making a choice. The same as when Rassie left Ireland to come to the Springboks. The same people who say, Rassie, they were saying, how stupid can you be? Because we love it when things are going wrong and blame. But Rassie came and made some big decisions. We all blamed him for those decisions. But now that it's working out, we're like, Rassie, we knew. No. So I've got the clips of what people were saying when Darkie came from Ireland and the changes that he was going to make. So that team under Beku Mumalo, and Mteto will tell the story, has made those changes. And for me, the most heartening thing is when they asked me to come back after 100 days. Because now they were saying, yes, somebody walked the journey with us. Right? So it's not about doing things because they are seen by the public. And yeah, but the Eskom story is Mteto's story.
It's ours.
Just quickly before, just what you found when you went to speak to those people, and that wasn't, again, that wasn't the popular narrative, that wasn't the narrative that people were talking about. They were reading books about betrayals, but it wasn't about the people at the coalface actually doing the work and having to solve the problems.
The average experience or tenure of those guys at Eskom is about 20 years. I might be wrong, maybe 25 years. So there was not an experienced public. Those guys that were there were very experienced. Two, they came from all race groups. They were all there. So the narratives that had been pelted about were, what seemed to be an issue, but Mteto can argue, was a leadership problem between those people who have to do the work and the people who were making the other decisions. But those guys, they wanted to win like anything. And for me, having journeyed with them and followed everything that they do, I've just been happy to see good guys. Because with the right leadership, you can take a Springbok team that got beaten 45-0 or whatever in New Zealand, and now beat New Zealand every other day. Because the leadership is changed, and the leadership gives guidance and direction. But we like to say that, but do we do it in our own environments? Because it requires tough love.
Yeah, yes. And truth. And I think that was something we were talking about yesterday when I said to you, how do you feel now? And you said, it's really nice to be out of crisis mode and to be able to start planning. Haven't turned around yet, but it's happening, and to start planning and moving forward in a more positive way is remarkable. But tell us about that crisis time and why you actually accepted what could have been a poison chalice.
Yeah, so I think many of you remember when our president was abroad. He had gone to the US trip, and then went to the UK, and then he had to cut that trip short. I hope you remember. Yeah. And he cut it short because of all of us were saying, how can you be out there when we're experiencing stage 6 load shedding? Yeah, you better come back here. And he came back on a Thursday. Friday, I got a call. Of course, I get this call, I don't know. I answer the call, and then he says, it's the president. I said, oh, really? Okay. Anyway, he then says, can I see you tomorrow? Where? And then we agree where his place. I think that was his first mistake, to say tomorrow. Because it gave me the time to think. But okay, this guy is not my friend. So when he's saying we must meet, clearly it's got nothing to do with all of the great things. It must have everything to do with the fact that he's back here. He should not be here. He's back here. And South Africans want him here. So it's linked to Eskom. So it's likely that he wants me to do something in Eskom. And then, of course, I consult my wife. And then we decide that, no. No. If it is that, it's a no. But I need to say it in such a way that I need to be respectful, but I need to deliver the no. So I meet him the following day, and indeed, it is what we thought it is. which is he wanted me to replace Andre de Ruyter. Good thing I thought about how to help him to realize that that's a bad idea. And of course, I truly believed in it. As I was saying, you remember, about a week before, I stood up in front of everybody and said that Andre is doing a great job. We need to support Andre instead of criticizing him. I said it. It was not a popular position that I was saying at first. You know. And I delivered the same thing to the president, that what is required is we need people that can support Andre. We need to strengthen that board. But Andre is doing a great job. That's one. The second thing is that we typically make this huge mistake that when problems surface, we look who is around when these things are surfacing and think that that's the person who caused the problem. When in reality, the problems were caused by people, you know, maybe 2 or 10 years ago. But problems are surfacing now. That really connected with the president. He said, that's interesting. That yes, as engineers, that's how we are taught about complex systems, you know. We should not just be looking around. So he said, yeah, I can connect with that. Look at my problem. Everybody's blaming me. All of these problems are made by Zuma and exactly, President. So let us allow, let's allow Andre to stay there, but bring around him people who are strong. Anyway, he changed his decision, he agreed. So that's how I ended up on that board. But then we're sitting on this board, and then Bravin, every time there's a change in stage of load shedding, is calling a board meeting. How many board meetings are we going to have in 2 weeks? Stanley said, please, can you just give us the space to do what we think we can do? But as board members, we're not going to do anything to, each time there's a change in the stage of load shedding, you call us. We're not going to allow us to understand what are the systemic issues that Eskom is facing. And of course, we talk to management, Andre and everybody else. And we realized, no, while I was made the chairman of the committee responsible for operations, that we need to have a discussion with the people on the ground. Power station general managers. These are the people that are running these power stations that are failing. We need to hear from them. What are the issues? Long story short, we called them, had a workshop with them, 2 days. Very, very great insights. That's the approach that I always use. Anywhere I go in an organization, you connect, you get insights from the people that are closest to the problem. We realized that we defined the problem wrong, in a wrong way. Our problem statement was wrong. Of course, in the media, even today, we continue to write the problem of Eskom is the aging fleet. Aging fleet, everybody keeps repeating, we're not thinking about the aging fleet. And the answer to that problem, of course, is that we need to retire this fleet because it's old, right? And then allow the private sector to come in with renewables. So that was the thinking. But listening to these people that you're talking about, they say, hey, we are engineers. These are machines. If you look after the machines properly, these machines will serve you for a very, very long time. The issue that we have here is the unreliability of the machine. And that can be sorted out by us going back to investing in maintenance. Invest in making sure that when we take these machines for maintenance, we use people that have the know-how. Because today we are being forced to use Lincoln's whatever company because of of course, we have to be BEE compliant, and then Lincoln has got absolutely no skills, not you, but they've got no understanding of this thing, and they're charging us 3 times. We need to have a relationship directly with Mercedes, directly with, I'm just using an example, directly with the original equipment manufacturers, you know? Anyway, oh, what is stopping you? No, it's the policies. Okay, let's scrap the policy, let's have this direct relationship with the original equipment manufacturers. Long story short, out of those insights, we realized that we need to change completely our strategy. We have to go back to fixing this, working with people that have got a deeper understanding on how to maintain these plants, and giving this team the resources that they need, because they were starved of funds. Said, how can you throw good money after bad? You know, allow this thing to die. We have to invest in this thing. So we had last year the worst load shedding. Last year, worst. I thought it was by design, because we've been taking these machines, fixing them. As we're taking them, there's less capacity to produce to meet the demand. Everybody, of course, was given all sorts of insults and everything. We had to go through all of that pain because we were clear about what we were doing. Of course, I remember when we were presenting to the president that this is going to take 2 years. Is there something that you did not understand about your mission? 2 years? We don't have 2 years. Mr. President, this needs 2 years. That was March last year. We are 18 months in. Said, it's not going to, we are going to see the improvement along the way as we go along, but we can only safely say there is not going to be load shedding after 2 years. That is in March 2025. So we are almost there. So that's what we've been executing, but it required leadership all the way. When we're talking about this Becky that we're talking about, we had to, he is someone that was sidelined, someone that was thrown under the bus because the politicians, they wanted stage 6, stage 7, whatever. Who's to blame? They took him, thrown him under the bus. So I had to go and sit with Becky and say, Becky, please, we need you.
We need you back.
You back. He wanted them to fail. He went, I want them to fail. He said, no, this is about the country. This is about South Africa. I said, okay. Now you have convinced me, I need to go and convince my extended family. And I need 2 weeks to do that. We gave him his 2 weeks. And then he came back and said, okay, they have put all of these wrong people in these power stations. Almost half of those I need to get rid of and put the right people who know what they're doing. Said, we've got your back. Go do that. You know. So when you came and present those as the new group of people now that he had put together to drive this turnaround, and that's the team that has taken us to be where we are now today.
You talk about stewardship and perhaps what has happened now. And in your book, Lincoln, you talk about leading from the heart. And I think your stewardship at Eskom has led to where we are today and heading in the right direction. You wrote this opinion piece for the Sunday Times in November 2018. And you talk about stewardship being one of the most important responsibilities of leaders. And you write about talking from the heart. So maybe if we could just talk about that stewardship, how you feel now, how you didn't lose your head with the insults, this terrible narrative, and finding a wreck of a business, but with still the solid structures there and the solid people, that you were able to work through what must have been a really difficult time and maintain your stewardship without losing yourself and staying calm, really, and getting us through as a country what you have?
You know, I think there's what I want us to take away from this discussion, if anything, is the fact that the people that we work with, we should know that they will rise to the level of our expectations of them.
Yes.
The people that work with us. If you think that they are stupid, they will never disappoint you.
Yeah.
If you think that they are great, they will show you that they are great. Same people. That is something that all of the jobs that I've done, I've realized that I don't go in there and take all of the people and bring new people. It's really about how we work with those people, how we stretch them, how we motivate them, how we show them what's possible, how to show them how to reach beyond their reach. Because most of them, they think that they've reached the end, that you can show them that they can do more. And when you start to see them doing all of that, and how excited that they are, you know, and that is leadership, and that is leadership, and that was what I think has changed things in Eskom, because it's really largely still the same people, you know, but they're being led differently, that thing again, holding people accountable. We think that by being nice is actually a good thing. Many people, they want to have those standards. They want to see themselves stretching, you know, and that is something that we seem to be missing in our country, you know, this thing of trying to be nice. But at the end of the day, the leader's big responsibility is that one, in my mind, of stewardship. When I'm given something, when I hand it over 5 years from now, give it to Lincoln, it must be better than what I found, always better. And that's taking care of stuff. And when I look at where we are across many dimensions, we're talking about hospitals, I'm talking public schools, I'm talking about our metros. If you look right across, this is where we are failing, this thing of taking care of things. And at the key part of that failure is the fact that there is not enough accountability. We are too nice. Anyway.
And that also speaks to you leading from the heart.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, 3 years ago, I was going to leave a large organization, and I'd finished reading Mteto's book, and I was talking to these new people who wanted me to go to an organization, and I called him, and I was like, you left MTN to go to Altron. I'm about to leave Standard Bank to go to Net1. Do you know these guys? And he says, sign now. Sign now and buy shares. And it's been the same journey of going to an environment that was like a poison chalice, huge reputational issues, morale of the people, you know, down, company burning cash, unprofitable, all of those things. But again, back to Mteto's thing, you go do the same thing. Go and listen to the people, go and listen to the customers, understand the issues. Now, 3 years on, that business has completely turned around. It's generating cash, it's profitable, it's gone on to buy other companies, rebranded, buying other big companies, and now that same company is going to be, on the 1st of October, the biggest fintech in South Africa.
Sure.
This was that same organization that was ready to die. It's the same people, same customers, just giving them a sense of hope. And then when we buy the companies we buy, we find people that we don't know. How do you bring them into the organization so that they also thrive? And so there are 3 kind of messages for me that come to it. The first one is, if serving is beneath you, then leadership is beyond you. I see so many jokers around who call themselves leaders, and they think everybody's there to serve them. These are hustlers, they're not leaders. Leaders are there to serve. So you gotta love the institution and the people and the customers. That's why you're there, right? The second one is, this thing of leading with from the front with the flag, not behind with the whip.
Yeah.
So you got to show what is the vision, what are we trying to achieve? And people have a sense that they belong to something. And when they do well, you reward them, you embrace them, you support them, you're their mascot, right? And the third and most important thing is leaders have to be talent magnets. You've got to be attracting talents. So throughout my career, every time when people gossip about me, they'll say, the problem, that Lincoln is not that good. He just surrounds himself with good people. Why would you go hire people that are more tough than you? Right? But if you go out and find good people, give them the space, give them the tools, give them the support, allow them to shine, then that's going to work. And I think all of us in our spheres of influence, what can we do to make the country better? Because we all look and, it's not working. Yes, it's not working. What are we doing in our environments? Of course, the politicians have to be accountable. They're going to do their things and whatever. But in our environments, if I'm not contributing to the school where I study, who's going to do it? If I'm not doing something for kids in my environment or whatever, what is it that you have, or what skill you have, what resources you have? What can we do to make this place better? And I think that we have an opportunity now with the new government, the new mood that we've got. Let's not fold our arms and hope that it's going to work. We've got to make sure that it works, because if it doesn't work, we're back to those 10 years. We know how that used to be, right? I don't want us to get those guys back in.
No.
So let's keep the thieves out and get the real people to make a country as beautiful as we have to succeed. We have the most incredible people. We have the most incredible environment. Let's make it work. Only other thing I'll say is, let's not do this thing where when the Boks play, we say they unite the country. Yes, they do. But after that, we divide.
Yeah.
So that I've just gone to a Bok game, I love it, we're united, but the next thing I'm fighting with somebody next door. I'm the one dividing. The Boks have done their piece. Right? What am I doing?
Yeah.
So it's what are we doing to help them? Right? If you think that's hard, think about the expectations we have of the Boks. No matter what, we expect them to win. But in our environment, why can't there be a high expectation? To Mteto's point, why can't we expect of ourselves something better, so that we leave our kids a better country than what we found?
I'm very sorry we've run out of time for questions, but Mteto and Lincoln are still here. Their books are for sale, so if you'd like to get them signed and chat to them, are you both around for the next little while? That would be fantastic. And just in conclusion, I think what we've talked about today, to sum it up, is integrity. Integrity specifically as it relates to turnaround strategy. So Mteto Integrity Nyati is, I think, would be your middle name. And Lincoln, you even name one of the chapters, integrity is the fulcrum upon which ethical leadership rests. And I think we're in great company today.
Sure.